Marvel and DC have found incredible success with the Absolute and Ultimate lines that have reinvigorated both the big two companies, leading us to ask the question, do they have to keep the Absolute and Ultimate micro lines going in perpetuity in order to keep up this momentum?
I, yeah. I mean, and not just to use the small evidence that we have doing, a podcast based on this stuff, but that's where the heat is right now. In terms of fan um, outcry, fan fervor, like
Engagement.
engagement. There we go.
Hmm.
I think that's probably where that engagement exists for both Marvel and DC right now. I talk about it. When I saw Barstool Sports posting about Absolute Batman, that blew my mind. So in the immediate, yeah, they got to keep this stuff going. They gotta milk this. They gotta beat this horse till it's even more dead.
But I think the question isn't in the immediate. I think the I think really the question is, how long can they keep it alive before it's boring?
Well, and that's where I was getting, because it's like, all right, the appeal to it right now and why it's hot is how it's so accessible.
Yeah.
Is that it's new. It's the new thing. When it's not the new thing anymore. Do we have an ultimatum? Ultimatum 2028 at this point? Because our only test, our only, I guess, sample of this happening was the previous Ultimate Universe.
But that at the very least ran its course, right? To whatever
Ooh,
degree.
well,
But
yeah.
It
but it
literally ran its course. It did, yeah.
for but a longer time frame than 5 years, right? Like it gave itself a chance. The company gave itself a chance, whether or not they did things that were creatively interesting or not. It stuck around long enough for somebody to say, "That's my Batman," and I've passed on, or sorry, my that's my Spider-Man, and I've passed that Spider-Man on to the next generation for me. I think that's where they need to keep these books going, is so that you can pass off that next generation of a Batman, a Spider-Man, an X-Men, whomever, to somebody.
Let me grab hold of this real quick. We already know on the DC side of things that they've Scott Snyder has been open about knowing the path and being signed on for 2 years to do this. On the Ultimate side, we've had the Maker countdown, which is a 2 year countdown. These are the hottest things in comics. But after that, Scott Snyder says, okay, I told my story for 2 years. I'm out of here on Absolute Batman. Kelly Thompson, all right, I did my thing on Wonder Woman. I'm out of here. Hickman goes and does whatever he does. The next wave of creators who come in, if they're not as good, or if the universe isn't as hot, or whatever the case is, right? And the sales drop, if they drop, at what point do Marvel and DC look at this and go, okay, do we just throw money at it and bring on hot big creators, or do we let it go?
How much of this fervor around these books do you think revolves around the dark side of it all? The backdrop of the all in ultimate universe, absolute universe, uh backdrop, I guess.
I would say minimal, to be honest.
Okay.
I think that's for us.
Yeah.
That's for the people who are eating, their whole plate of food. Because if you look at the content of those Absolute books, it's not mentioned.
Yeah.
If you're just reading
Yeah.
those Absolute books, the closest it got to mentioning it was this past new free comic book day.
You have to make the transition from absolute to mainline
Yeah,
and notice it in mainline
yeah. Which,
to make that connection.
in the way the current Absolute books are doing, or they're actively not doing that, which is the smart move at this moment,
I agree with that.
to kind of silo those books.
I'm not sure if I fully agree, in the sense that the us we're talking about is comic book fans, activated comic book readers, right? And we know that there's some amount of people who are jumping into comics because of this, because of the Absolute Universe and the Ultimate Universe, because it's their version of the character. But there are also a lot of lapsed readers, people who are like, I don't care about DC right now, or they're buying their one or two DC books and they, whatever, that see all this happening and they go, oh shit,
Mm.
there's this big thing going on and there's a whole new universe and Darkseid is dead and all of this. I think that I think if they only launch the Absolute Universe with no connection at all to Mainline, it's still big, but I don't think it's as big. I think it's the connection between the two that creates all this fervor because it's bringing in lapsed readers and new readers.
And I think sort of that's where Absolute's got the upper hand on Ultimate, is that theirs feels more Absolute feels more monumental. But I think at a certain point, they both are going to run out of steam.
At a certain point, they're going to run into the same issue that caused them to make the brand in the first place.
Yeah. So what do they do after that?
I think they need to constantly reinvent themselves. And not in the way that, Spider-Man reinvents himself with a new number one and he's looking for a new job. Maybe he's a photographer this time. Maybe he's a professor this time. I think they need to be more like Ultimate Spider-Man and what happened with Miles to completely reinvent that line. I think, if Bruce Wayne gets killed, have a new person in that Cale down the line. I think they need to do the things that they're too scared of doing in Mainline and set that precedent for their titles going forward. And I think that timeline needs to keep moving. Things need to keep growing in those universes to set those apart from the ever-shifting timeline of the main universes.
I think that needs to happen, but to a very controlled degree. You don't want to make it so that the expectation is something is going to change every few issues or every
Yeah.
season
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Because
No,
then,
sure. Yeah.
right, because then you run into an issue there of, okay, well, what do I grab onto, right? Like, I think you maintain the Bruce Wayne for 5 years and then the seismic shift of something that I think makes sense versus the lifetime of a run of a creator like Scott or Kelly Thompson.
In my eyes, you instead of treating it like Spider-Man, you treat it like Walking Dead.
Stakes, right?
Yeah.
Like there's finality. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's very attractive as a reader who likes the indies or something, right? There's a finality to these characters, to these stories, and that I think feels good in long form storytelling.
I agree.
My my answer to this is that they should actually not keep them going. I think that this is the point at which business will hurt those lines. Whenever the story is told, like the natural story that they've established concludes and they keep it going after that and they shuffle in the next wave of creators, that's when it becomes Ultimate Comics, like what happened with the Ultimate line, and that stunk. Everybody knows that by that point, the only Ultimate book worth reading was Spider-Man, right? Because Mark Miller had left, and Ed Brubaker and Brian K. Vaughan and everybody, all the artists even who made that line so special, had gone on to do other things. And so then it was like, why are we even here? Then they started having the Wasp get eaten and shit like that. My thought is that what has to happen is the same thing that happened to Marvel Mainline in the mid 2000s. The Ultimate line was developed because Mainline Marvel was stale.
Mm.
And I think we're in a similar place. DC is doing it better because the Mainline is thriving alongside Absolute. But I do think there's a world where that can go away, Absolute, and you bring all that hype into your Mainline.
Mm.
If they can't do that, it won't matter that it won't matter that they have a micro line if no one gives a shit. if the big time creators have left and the hype is gone, there'll just be more books.
Use it as the net that has been casted and rein those people in with something of consequence. Diminish the thing, not diminish, but like you get rid of the thing that people got in the door in, and then that rolls into the the stuff that you have. Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess I also see it as it's an ever present net. I think you can capture this initial wave, bring them into the fold with some event, and then it still exists as a relatively clean slate that now has connection to the main line before phasing out.
It's tricky too because I think Absolute and this current Ultimate Universe are different in their inception. Like Absolute, the way Snyder talks about it is it's creator first. The idea of like Absolute Batman ending because Scott Snyder told a story and then it ends, I'm cool with. But if it means the line, then somebody does, I don't know, I have Absolute Blue Beetle as an idea. And there's a creative reason for it, and they have they can do that book then. Like that's not too, like that makes sense to me. Whereas like Ultimates, we don't really know the objective. In fact, its inception is muddy in terms of what we know. So I don't really know where that goes, but I can see Absolute going beyond the Trinity. I think that's what it needs to learn to do.
It's trying. It's trying to spread its wings
it
in
is.
that way, and I think it's doing that in a smart approach of minis with like Martian Manhunter, for example. And maybe it, but then I worry it becoming that. Oh, this is the place where you're indie darling or you're up and coming hot creator, the hot hand of whatever has his stab at a a different universe. Then what does it become for who's the landlord that does what is it?
Sean
White Knight?
Murphy.
Sean Murphy.
Who's the
Right.
landlord? And we knew right away. Yeah.
I I think anybody who reads comics with frequency will look at the Absolute line and say, "Oh, this is successful because the books are good."
Hmm.
And as long as that stays true, you can do whatever you want, right? You can have this line go on and on and on and on. My problem is that I don't think the books will stay good. And it's not the creators that are on them now that I'm worried about. It's the ones that will be on after them. Because without all this hype and buzz, I don't think DC's incentivized to pay top dollar to bring whoever's hot in 3 years' time to do these books and keep this line going.
And who knows if
And
that.
even
No, go
sorry.
ahead. Go. Okay, go ahead.
And even still, like, it might not be that much longer, even with the creators that are on it now. Scott Snyder has sort of ongoing potential for Batman, but we've had a ongoing Scott Snyder Batman before. And Jason Aaron's Superman is, we've kind of talked about like the fact that it's, we're seeing all the same stuff that is in the mainline universe. So how much longer is that going to be interesting even before a big creative shift?
I guess the good thing is those two creators are known to have done long ass runs on characters before. But my question is like, what is good? Is Absolute and Ultimates good right now? Because some would argue, DC pre All In wasn't great. Marvel right now, mainline, some would argue not that great. Is Ultimates and Absolute being considered good just a comparison?
Because of the other half.
If Marvel's mainline becomes good, like it did when the original Ultimates, universe was happening, Bendis gets on, the mainline proper books, and then the Ultimates line starts diminishing.
Actually, that's a good point.
It's a
What
shifting
if,
scale.
yeah, what if then one or the other falters and that inadvertently affects the other, right? Like it drags it down rather than gets lifted up.
Or maybe that's what the use of it is. Maybe know that and know it's going to be a shifting scale and learn to roll with that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, like Bendis was able to use the hype of Ultimate Spider-Man, and this could be true or not true, but at the same time as Ultimate Spider-Man, like the mainline Marvel universe at the time was collapsing, right? The Avengers were disassembling, the mansion was utterly blowing up. The build up for new Avengers was coming. Extremis was happening all at the same time. Like all these little building blocks were being put in place while Ultimate Spider-Man was happening. So, while they have this uh building period, with sort of the safety net of the absolute universe, if they're smart, what they'll do is they'll use the pristine look of the all-in universe that we have right now, and they'll make it fall, in that same way that the Avengers had to in Disassembled.
Yeah, I think that in my mind, these need to be they need to be treated as siloed things that are used to generate interest in the brand overall and hopefully create new audiences who will be interested in mainline once these micro lines have ran their course. I don't believe there will be a world where we will see either of these micro lines last, I don't like 5 years. I don't think we'll be here talking about either micro line in 5 years.
5 years feels generous.
Interesting. How long did Ultimates last before Ultimatum?
Well, before Ultimatum was like 2008.
It was dying at that. It was dying for years before that.
Yeah, I mean, when you say dying, you mean like from a sales perspective, right? Or
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, because you had Bendis on Ultimate Spider-Man, but besides him, everybody had left. All
And
the
everything was a
old
shifting
guard had
miniseries.
left,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the big like Ultimate X-Men, for example, was written by who even knows? You know what I'm saying? Like, it went from Mark Miller and Bendis and X and X and X to I don't even know who it was right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I'm just
so even conservatively, like that's 99 to say '07, 8 years.
Wasn't
Two,
Ultimate Spider-Man 2001?
yeah,
Okay.
2000. I have your Ultimate Marvel as an imprint ran from 2000 to 2015.
in 2015
Okay.
that thing was decaying at that point. That thing
And
was
Right.
long
and
long gone than dead.
we're saying Ultimatum was '08. So okay, 8 years.
And I think that's probably that's a very different time in the market.
Yeah.
That's a different time, in for comics. Like a book that sold middling in 2005 that you would look like, okay, that's a decent selling book, I guess, would be a top selling book today.
Hmm.
So I don't think there's as much rope or grace for a low performing book as there was. The definition has also changed, and I just don't see a world where Marvel and DC can funnel creative talent into both these spaces to make them work in the long term.
So you're thinking absolute universe, ultimate universe needs to be used as a tool to strengthen the main line because there is no world where those universes, in terms of creative, money generation, or fan fervor, will ever eclipse the main line. So therefore, you can never really put all of your resources into it as a permanent thing, because it always needs to assist the main line.
Yeah, because then what else, right? Like, because then you're not going to have two healthy. We have no evidence of a
Sure.
time where there were two healthy lines side by side that persisted for long term. And in 2 years, Absolute's not bringing in new readers. Like, yeah, right now that's happening, and that's great, and I'm not denigrating that. I'm just saying that in 2 years, it becomes another line of comics.
And if it is in 2 years, then that's patient zero. That's new evidence, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can even take it smaller than that. It just becomes another Bat book.
I would argue it already is.
let's say let's say we get to the 2 year mark and all the creative teams that exist right now in Absolute leave.
Mm.
What do you want to see Marvel and DC do?
I, you're gonna have to convince me that the next arc, the next set of arcs, the saga continues to the expectation of these other books. Um, and it depends the title, right? Like uh, the softest book for me right now is Wonder Woman, Absolute Wonder Woman.
It's the softest?
Yeah, for me at least.
Wow. Over Green Lantern and Flash.
Well, that they've had what, 2 issues?
Okay,
No,
fair. Out of the main three, okay.
yeah. Like for the Trinity, you really need to sell in. It needs to be at par or better than. Any less, you have to. It has to have some kind of impact to the Lord. Like there has to be a reason I'm reading it at that point.
For me, it has to be it's creative for me. Like I think of like Jeff Johns and how he's doing his stuff at with Geiger and Redcoat. He's talked about since its inception he wants to hand these off to someone eventually to have it keep going in perpetuity. If that's what Snyder wants for Absolute Batman and that's what was at its genesis as its thought, then I want to see that. If he wants to tell a story, he's like, all right, my story's done. I'm done. Then that's where Absolute Batman ends for me. I can see a lot of the minis being, one and done minis, but I can see maybe Absolute Batman extending past its Snyder Dragotta creation. And I'd be curious, and I wouldn't hate it, someone else tackling that idea of a character, but maybe they do something else instead. I don't know.
Yo, imagine being the artist that has a follow up Dragotta.
Oof,
Oh no, thanks.
tricky.
For me, I think the next step has to be it has to feel like the next chapter in the universe story. The absolute universe has fallen. Here are the consequences to the main line. And, even if that's all new, whatever, 1 year later, whatever, like it's gotta feel like there are consequences from that.
I will have a lot of respect for Marvel and DC if they let these lines go when the story is done. Personally, I don't like. I love Batman to death. Batman is the greatest. I don't need more ongoing Batman. I'm hip to it and I'm into it right now because there's a story being told and I want to see how it all plays out. But after that, we have mainline Batman. Like I'm not clamoring for more Batman at this point in my life. And I feel the same way about this Superman too. Like Absolute Wonder Woman is great, and I'm into that because I'm not reading mainline Wonder Woman. But if I were, I'd probably feel the same way about that too. So for me, the ballsiest thing they could do is to end it. And if they don't, there's gonna have to be a really, really good reason why. Let us know though what you think. What do you think that Marvel and DC should do when the absolute and DC and Ultimate Universe stories are told? Do you want to see them continue with new creators? Do you want to see them go away? What should they do? Let us know in the comments below. Sound off. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.